And welcome to the Charron Zone. I'm here with my good friend, Mr. Michael Elsner. Michael is a world-renowned guitarist, producer, film and TV sync master. He's a mentor to myself and many others. And he wears many other hats, including the one that he's wearing now. No, He didn't just rob a bank. It's cold in Nashville. Right?
It is chilly.
Yeah. So thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Elsner, as I like to call you. So we're gonna dive right into it. And you've had how many film and TV placements have you had thus far? I know it keeps rising.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the exact number offhand. It's over 2,200.
Wow.
Currently, but I just haven't kept it down. I don't keep track down to the exact number. You know, when I hit the next, milestone, I'll know. But over 2,200.
Wow. Yeah, it's very impressive. And just to drop some names, you've done. You had a commercial in the SuperBowl. You've done stuff for The Voice, American Idol. Just tell people a few things that you.
Yeah. 2 years ago, I had the SuperBowl. It was actually for it was a trailer for a show on Amazon Prime called Jack Ryan.
Oh, okay.
Which they just came out with season 2 like a week or two ago. I've done American Idol, The Voice, the Ellen DeGeneres Show. Shows like Flip or Flop. One of my favorite shows ever. Impractical Jokers. I love that one.
Oh yeah.
I've done stuff like Dr. Drew. So You Think You Can Dance. A lot of shows like that. I've done trailers for Disney's Cinderella. I did trailer for Ocean's 8. Currently, just found out I had some stuff on Sneaky Pete season 3. Let's see, Narcos, Better Call Saul, obviously Jack Ryan, commercials for Buick, Audi, Mazda, Skechers, fall and spring Skechers campaign, and a bunch of video games along the way. I did the math recently, and I've contributed music to over 180 different television series.
Wow!
So it's been a busy run. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very, very impressive. Half of those I had no idea. That's really, really impressive.
Yeah,
So, and you've been doing that professionally for what? Around 10 years? 10 years?
15 years, yeah.
15 years. Oh,
15,
wow.
yeah.
And so you used to be based in LA, now you're based in Nashville. So, the reason I always tell people, on this podcast, most of the people that listen to it are people that are singers, songwriters, recording artists, trying to come up and make it. So we'll get right into it. How accessible is that market to just everyday schlubs like me and like everyday singer songwriters?
So that's a great question. Aside from being a singer, I was the same thing. I've always just been a guitar player who grew up playing in bands.
Yep.
So it's interesting when people go like, well, I'm a singer-songwriter. I'm like, yeah, okay. I'm a guitar player who played in bands. What's the difference? The only difference was I didn't front the band. Mm-hmm. I played guitar, I wrote the songs, and I sang background vocals. I'm not a front guy. It's not my personality. And so to me, it's the exact same thing. I didn't go to music school. I don't have any music training. I have about as much music training as you do.
That's frightening.
I just learned how to, probably like you, I learned how to write songs sitting in my bedroom and with a guitar writing songs. So that's my background. So, it's interesting when people ask that question, how accessible is it? Well, that's exactly who I am.
I was going to say, that's you.
The only difference is in my younger years, in my teens, my 20s, and my early 30s, I was just incredibly shy. So there's no way that I could ever front something. That was, never my personality. But I was always the guy who wrote the songs. I wrote the lyrics. I ended up getting into production. I started, when I was 16 years old on a 4-track, old Tascam 464 4-track with a cassette, and I scaled up in my early 20s to an old, what's called a Roland VS 880. It was a digital 8-track. And I just kept learning production. Bought the drum machines and and just did demos for years and years and years, and learned how to produce. I learned how to write. I mean, I learned how to produce the music and how to put it all together. And so it's completely accessible. It's completely accessible to every musician. And the reality is now, with the amazing amount of the amazing power that you can get out of your laptop with a $500 DAWs, something like Logic or Pro Tools or Reason or Studio One or anything like that, Digital Performer, and a cheap interface. I don't mean cheap as in like $99 cheap. I mean cheap as in like relatively affordable, under $1,000. By the time you invest your money into a decent recording system, you're going to be a couple $1,000s into it, but you can create professional sounding recordings literally with a laptop out of your home. That can go
right to film and TV.
It can go right to film and TV. It can go right onto your CD.
Yeah.
The outlet, the quality, the standards are the same. You're not going to release demos on a record that you're going to, try and sell to people, right? So it's the same thing. You're not going to release demos to TV shows where they have millions and millions and millions of viewers. It's a serious industry. Yeah. So the production standards have to be there. But the reality is that for any musician, just like if you want to learn how to play guitar, you got to sit down with the instrument and learn how to play it. If you want to, get your music out there and get your ideas put together, I feel that every musician with a very small investment, relatively speaking, can invest in a DAW, a laptop, an interface, a nice microphone, and some time. Yeah. You have the world at your fingertips at that point.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about maybe singer-songwriters, artists, whatever, that have professionally produced CDs or albums, and they release them for themselves, but they're independent. There's probably a market for that too, like people that are trying to become an artist more.
Oh, of course.
And they've gone to the studio, hired professionals, so they have maybe 2 or 3 albums. Maybe speak to that a little bit, and how they could get their songs placed, and kind of how that works, where if they're independent and they've written the songs and how they're easily clearable, then a lot of productions will want to use independent musicians as opposed to paying for Sweet Home Alabama.
Oh yeah, because it's going to cost like $50,000 for that song, of course. Yeah, well, you touched on a bunch of really good points there. So the thing is that the first thing that musicians have to understand when you're walking into the sync world, no matter what you're doing as a musician, whether you're an artist pursuing a record deal, whether you're a band member, in a band, or whether you're just an instrumentalist trying to get gigs and put money, put food on the table, it doesn't matter. Whatever role you're playing as a musician, the one thing you have to keep in mind is that when you start licensing your music, when you start getting into that game, you're no longer working in the music industry. There's a complete separation, right? The music industry is its own thing, okay? And that's the path that we're used to traveling down. So we have these little rules and things that we've learned along the way, right? Yep. Well, the licensing world is completely different. When you're licensing your music to TV shows, you're in the TV industry. You're working in the TV industry now. When you're licensing your music to films, you're now working in the film industry. It has its own separate set of rules. When you're licensing your music to commercials, it's a completely different industry. You're in the commercial and the ads and the promo industry. Completely different set of rules. Same thing with video games. So the very first thing that every musician has to understand is that when you are licensing your music, you are in a completely different industry. Those industries do not touch with the music industry. So you can continue to market your songs. You can continue to pursue the record deal. You can continue doing whatever the heck you want to do with your songs. What's going on in the licensing world, the people who are licensing your songs for the TV show that they're working on, they don't give a crap what you're doing with your songs if you have a record out or if you're selling them at your shows. It's insignificant to them.
See, that's so exciting. I don't think a lot of people realize that you could have all these full albums of professionally produced music that you're still either touring on and selling on iTunes and all that stuff, but you could also double dip
Of course, you could quadruple dip.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. You have the music pursuit where you're doing shows and you're selling your records, and if it's a big deal to you, you've got your pennies that you're making on Spotify, right?
Yeah.
We can go over some of those numbers in a second because they're pathetic. And you can hope for the best that you're going to make enough money in your Spotify streams that you can buy yourself a dinner once a month, right? I mean, that's the reality of those numbers, And while you're doing that, while you're focusing on that path, because this is what I did when I was starting, I was going after the record deal for years, for years and years and years and years. And I used licensing as a great way to leverage that and open up other doors for that. But at the same point, while you're pursuing that path, you can then license your songs to TV shows. You can license your songs to ads and commercials. You can license your songs to films and video games. And the beautiful thing about this, again, is that those industries don't touch each other, right? They're completely independent. But what's nice is that when you start licensing your music to shows and to commercials, that gives you a lot more leverage as an artist when you are presenting yourself to a record label or a publisher, because now you're coming to the table with traction.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you're leveraging licensing to build your artist career over here.
Absolutely powerful. That's definitely something that I didn't know until I met you and we started talking about it and you started telling me about it. So I'm really excited for musicians, singers, songwriters, everybody out there who has all these songs that they've written and all this music sitting there that they're whether they're still working it or not, they could not even be working it anymore, and they have it all in the vault. They could pull it out. It doesn't matter how old it is. You could still pitch it to.
So you make a great point, because you're talking about the vault. My whole catalog is basically a vault. It's not really a vault, but it literally sits on hard drives, and it is a massive catalog of music. And the latest tracks that I write, they're not the ones that are getting placed right now. It's the tracks that I wrote years ago that are getting the placements now.
Wow.
Because it takes a while for everything to cycle through,
Yeah.
And it's interesting, I have a licensing program where I teach people how to do this. And in my private mastermind over the summer, I showed them, it was from one of our latest royalty statements, I showed them an example, I put together a whole video that I shared with everyone in the group, of one song that I wrote like 4 or 5 years ago that had just brought in over $3,300. That one song generated a total of $3,300 in that, the June royalty statement. And I broke it down and showed, here's a song that was written, 4 or 5 years ago. It's 2 chords, and this song is generating a total just in this one quarter of $3,300. And there's obviously a lot of other ones that came in as well. But it's not the song that I wrote 2 weeks prior. It's stuff that's been sitting in the vault for a while. So yeah, if you're an artist and you have songs and albums that again, the music industry operates in this a completely different world where everything has to be current. If that little C with the circle around it doesn't say 2019, it's old and it's antiquated, right? In the licensing world, if you have a beautiful song that fits the emotion and matches the emotional impact of a particular scene, and you wrote it 6 years ago, who cares?
Right.
That's the song that's going to work. It doesn't matter if you wrote it 6 years ago or 6 months ago or 6 days ago. Yeah. It's the song that works for the scene.
And or if the production is looking for something that feels like a 60s song.
Exactly.
Or it doesn't
it's time specific, period specific. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
There are shows all the time that go back and it's like one of the first exercises and really pieces of homework that I give people is for the next week, just listen to TV. Don't watch it, just listen to it. Okay, You put on any show. It doesn't have to be a show that you particularly like. Just randomly pick a channel, lay down on your sofa, just lay down and relax, kind of like you're meditating in a way, and just listen. Don't watch the scene. Don't pay attention to what's going on with the actors. Who cares what they're wearing? It doesn't matter. Just listen to the music in the background. And when it comes to a commercial, listen through the commercials. Every commercial has music, right? So listen your way through the commercials as well. Give yourself an hour a day at minimum to just listen to music, and don't watch the same shows the whole time. You flip around and just listen to music, and you will hear an unbelievable amount. You'll hear an unbelievable amount of music. You'll hear a lot of different pieces, but on top of it, you're going to hear pieces across so many different genres, in so many different tempos, lots of different instrumentation, different vocalists, different vocal quality. You're going to probably even hear some stuff where there might be like a flashback in one of the shows you're watching to like the 1920s. Then you're going to hear a piece that's specific to the 1920s. Well, in the 1920s, that music that they were recording back then didn't sound good. So
Right.
so they probably need someone who recorded music that sounds good quality-wise. The recordings sound good, but it's period specific to the style. It might be some old style jazz piece, right? But it wasn't something that was lifted off of a old phonograph record from 1925.
Yeah.
Because that would sound like garbage,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
So yeah, there's even flashbacks to like the 1970s, or maybe there's a scene where it goes back to the 1980s and it shows a guy driving in a Camaro, and he's got some 80s hair metal band blasting on the radio.
And they didn't want to pay Motley Crue, so they
exactly.
Yeah, so they paid an independent artist.
Yeah, if you have an old 80s band from back then, that stuff obviously wouldn't get placed as often as something that's new and current, but it'll definitely fit a need that will come up at some point. So yeah, you can absolutely monetize your past catalog, but yet in the music industry, I think once a record's a year and a half, 2 years old, it's outdated, right?
Oh, yeah.
Not so in this world. Yeah.
Yeah. Excelente. So you also speak a lot about mindset and motivation, which I think is something that is under talked about, if that's even a term, because as I know, I go through it every day. I'm working on so many different things, wearing so many different hats, that it's really hard to keep focused. It's really hard to keep motivated. So do you have any advice to people?
Yeah, well, I was a chronic procrastinator in my 20s, and I remember even going to the store and buying a book on how to overcome procrastination.
And it took you a year to read it?
Yeah, it took me a long time to read it. But so the thing that I've learned is I've realized over the years that there are 3 keys to success, and this is probably what you're bringing up here. I've learned that, and everyone's going to have their own thing. This isn't something that I learned from Tony Robbins or anything like that, although he might speak about it. I don't really know. Mm-hmm. But I've learned that there are 3 keys to success, at least in my world. One is your mindset, right? The second is your skill set. This isn't in any particular order. Mm-hmm. And the third are your actions. I call them purposeful actions.
Yes.
And I know that this is one thing, and I'm not a Tony Robbins guy. I've never read any of his books or anything like that, but I know that I have listened to some of his stuff.
I've read all of his books.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Well, then he talks about massive action.
Yes.
Right? I know he talks about, and so I'm not going to argue with him. He knows what he's talking about, but I call it purposeful action. Mm-hmm. Because to me, what made a big change in my life was 2006-ish. I decided that my word for the year was going to be purpose, meaning that before I did anything, before I just agreed to get together with someone to write a song or whatever it was, I had to define the purpose first. Mm-hmm. Now it's just going to be my word for the year, and the funny thing is it hasn't changed since, 13 years later. So for me, everything, I have to know, kind of like the ideas start with why. Why are we doing this? So for me, it's like, what is the purpose of this? I have to know what the purpose is before I do something, before I take the time to do that. The other thing too is the actions I take have to serve that purpose. So I think that a lot of musicians, and this has just been my experience over the years, working with many over the years, they generally just do stuff, right? They do stuff, and they throw everything up against the wall, and they hope that something's eventually going to stick. and I don't think that that's necessarily the path to success. I think you have to know why you're doing what you're doing. That's really where it's going to start. You know, why am I doing this? What is the path? You kind of have to lay a plan out. One of the other things that I'm a big fan of is the mindset, right? We all, as musicians, we already put the time into the skill set. You know, we've spent the years sitting on in our bedrooms practicing guitar or learning how to write songs or, you know, learning how to mix music or whatever it is, right? We've already put in that effort. And most musicians have that part down. Yeah. But they're missing out on the other two, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of musicians have this scarcity mindset. It's this mindset that they've spent too long in the music industry. The music industry's just been decimated, so there's very little opportunities, right? Mm-hmm. So it's this whole thing of like there's not a lot of opportunity. You know, it's so hard. It's hard to make money. It's hard to get people to listen to my songs. It's hard to get my music out there. It's that scarcity mindset. And of course, when you're telling yourself that, you're creating boundaries for yourself. You're creating a box for yourself. And the reality is that, at least in my world, in the licensing world, and I've gone down both roads, so I know the difference between the two. I knew that when I was going down the music industry route, and I went down that route for 18 years, from the time I was 18 to when I was 36. Wow. I did it for a long time. It got progressively harder, starting in the mid-90s all the way up until 2011. Mm-hmm. I mean, progressively harder, because the music industry has just been like on a downward spiral for a long time. Mm-hmm. But as I got into the licensing world, starting around 2004, that world was just growing. So it was like this interesting thing that I was half of me was always pursuing the music industry route with the bands I was in, with less and less opportunities, but yet the songs I was writing were getting more and more yeses in the licensing world. I was getting turned down every day in the music industry, and I was getting told yes and welcomed with open arms in the licensing industry. It's a complete mind shift, but I had to realize that, you know, there's an abundance of opportunity for musicians if you just know where to look. And if you're looking at an industry where the numbers are dismal, those numbers are a barometer for the health of any industry, and it's a pathetic industry right now. But when you start looking at the licensing world and you realize, oh my gosh, just in the last 10 years alone, the amount of TV shows has increased 170%. 174% increase in the amount of scripted shows.
It's incredible.
Unbelievable. It's not taking into account films, documentaries, corporate promos, commercials, video games, trailers for film and video games. We're not even counting that. We're just looking at the amount of scripted television shows. 174% increase. But yet the music industry has it's just been crashing. Between 2018 and 2019, the numbers have dropped 23% and 25% for the number of physical albums sold and also digital downloads, right? Physical albums have gone down 23%, digital downloads have gone down 25%. That's an astronomical decline, right? Just in the last year alone. Yeah. But yet, you have over 500 TV shows currently in production. So you have to look at it. If you're just looking at the music industry path, yes, I mean, total scarcity mindset, no opportunity.
To just jump in real quick, people like me, just look at your CD Baby accounting of your Spotify payments. Yeah, it's laughable. It's a joke. Yeah. And I see all these artists that are just clamoring and paying money to get on Spotify playlists and stuff, and they think it's the way to, I don't know, fortune and fame, but
so let's look at those numbers.
It's fractions of pennies.
Fractions of pennies, and let's look at them. So because I actually have done the research on these numbers. Spotify and all of the online streaming services, they pitch the fact that they have over 40 million songs in their catalog. All of them virtually pitch, catalog of over 40 million songs. Mm-hmm. Anyone who's listening to this can go and you can do all this research yourself. All these numbers are out there. But the latest stats with Spotify is that Spotify claims an average of over 40,000 new songs uploaded to Spotify every day. Okay, now we always talk about Spotify, right? So if we just look at the number, let's take 40 million songs. It's not even an account for the last, week's worth of 40,000 songs a day. We'll just look at the 40 million that they have in the catalog. Last year, the revenue from streaming services was $9.3 billion. Okay?
Yep.
So let's take 40 million songs, and let's divide it by $9.3 billion. Or let's take 9.3 and divide it by 40 million songs. 9.3 billion divided by 40 million. That number is $232.50, which means that assuming everything is even, right? Tim Charron's songs get streamed just as much as Justin Timberlake's, right? If that's the case, everyone is streamed equally. That means everyone's song, each song is worth $232.50. Now we know that's not the case, right?
Yep.
Because the big artists get streamed a lot and the independent artists don't do much. So let's look at the actual numbers a little deeper. In America, the minimal monthly wage, basically like the minimum wage, but minimum monthly wage for the month is $1,472. That's what America looks at as the minimum monthly wage. In order to generate $1,472, there's like 9 different streaming services. Napster is actually the most generous. 77,000 and a little change streams will make you a little under $1,500. But Spotify is over 336,000. Then you work your way all the way up to YouTube, and it's 2,133,333. So, as an independent artist, if you want to make $1,500 a month with your Spotify, and that's what everyone spends their time worried about Spotify.
Yep.
You need to get 336,000 streams a month. So, that's insane. How many licenses do you need to make $1,500? One.
There you go.
Between the upfront licensing fee, which could be multiple 5 figures, depending on the actual license you get. Between the upfront licensing fee and then the back-end royalties, when that show airs, you can easily hit $1,500. And the example I was talking about earlier is I gave an example this past summer to the people in my course from my last royalty statement, where I picked one song out of there and showed how this one song with 2 chords, B minor and G major, generated over $3,300. So, do you want to promote your stuff to 336,000 people, hoping that every single one of them streams your song once? Or do you want to promote your music to maybe a dozen or 2 very specific key individuals in the licensing space and actually make a career out of it? And that was
with the same music too. With the same music potentially. And
that was for me when I turned 36 in 2011. I was living in Los Angeles, and I had to take a big step back because at that point I had like 750 placements at that point,
Yep.
And I remember looking at this going like, for the last 5 years, really since 2006, 2007, for the last 5 years I made my living on my licenses. But yet I've been pursuing the band thing and doing all that stuff with the particular band I was in at that time. And just trying to get someone to even give us a break. But yet I had to finally step back and go, this is stupid.
Yeah.
This is stupid. Why don't I just focus 100% of my energy on writing music for TV and just live the life that I want to live and not be so worried about what some idiot at some publishing house or some record label who's too afraid to say yes because God forbid they put themselves on the line because they're going to lose their job in the next 6 months anyway. Why am I focused so heavily on what they say when actually what's happening is my goal as a musician was to get my music heard by millions of people, where the reality is that I have this other outlet and that's actually happening.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm actually getting music song after song after song after song heard by millions of people. But the thing for me was that mindset shift to realizing like, okay, it's just not what I thought it was going to look like back in the early 90s when I started this.
Yeah. And when
I was a teenager.
It's a matter of, like you said earlier, it's a matter of focus. What are you focusing on?
Yeah.
Are you focusing on Spotify or are you focusing on things that can make you a lot of money? And I think a lot of light bulbs probably went off when people hear those numbers are just staggering.
The numbers don't lie. And again, anyone can go look up these numbers. Those numbers are all, very readily available. I'm not making any of them up. But they're scary. I have a couple friends, a couple co-writers. Actually, a co-writer of mine from years ago who a lot of people know. His name's Aloe Black. He and I wrote a bunch of tracks back when I was living in LA. Well, he had a big song with Avicii a number of years ago. And I think it was actually the most streamed song of like 2013 or 2014.
Oh, wow.
But Aloe actually wrote a whole piece about how this was like one of the most streamed songs, but his royalties were like $4,000, his streaming royalties. Now, another great example of this was Pharrell. Pharrell had the song Happy.
Yes.
We all know Happy.
Yes, I've seen this article.
Yeah. And that was a very popular article. You know, I forgot what the numbers were, but I know it's about enough to buy a scooter, right? He had like $2,500, which is literally enough to buy a scooter, right? Yeah. And but here's the thing, and this is my perspective of license, and it wasn't what he made on his royalties on that. Now that was what he made. What they were talking about is that's what they made on their streaming royalties. Mm-hmm. This is important to keep in mind here. They didn't just make $4,000 or $2,500 on their royalties. They made millions of dollars. They made, they made hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think Happy probably brought in millions of dollars, but cumulatively, you know. But here's the thing: the streaming aspect was basically free advertising. What made them money on those songs were all the licenses. Mm-hmm. Because when these shows, because there was a season where you could not escape Happy. It was on every commercial, it was on every show, right? Mm-hmm. Do you think they licensed Happy for $1,500? Heck no. No. They licensed that song for tens of thousands of dollars, right? So every license, he was getting the upfront fees of tens of thousands of dollars. Now that's split between him and his co-writers and his publishers, and there's people here. So we're just looking cumulatively of what that song generated. And then on the back end, he's getting those royalties. Now he's getting featured performance royalties on all these television shows, on network TV, on cable TV, prime time, etc. Yeah, that's gonna blow away those little streaming royalties that he made of, like, you know, $2,500 or $4,000 here and there. You can't build a career off of $2,500 and $4,000.
Right. I was also going to say, and then when things go into syndication, reruns and things like that, there's just amazing potential.
There's that, and then we haven't even talked about foreign royalties. Worldwide sync rights, right? So what happens when a show in Australia licenses it? What happens when a show in Finland or Germany licenses it? Yeah. Wow. It's a massive market. You know, when I talk about the 500 TV shows currently in production, I'm just talking about scripted shows in America.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah.
So again, this is that mindset shift. Mm-hmm. As musicians who are pursuing the traditional music industry path, they get caught up in the cycle of scarcity. There's not enough opportunity. There's, you know, I even get that too with, like, well, if you're so successful at this, why are you teaching this? It's like, well, because if my songwriting partner and I worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we could not keep up with the requests that come into us, just us.
Yeah.
There's so much opportunity.
Well, I've seen you working, you know, 14-hour days in the studio. And you know, but living in this world, it's like, man, there's an abundance of opportunity, and the reality is that my songs aren't perfect for every placement. I'm not in competition with people, you know. If you know, you got to keep in mind also, this is also a bit of that mindset aspect. You know, this is a big mindset shift for musicians coming from the traditional music industry to the licensing industry. The first thing is you got to realize you're in a different industry, completely different industry. Mm-hmm. Throw out all the rules you learned. Throw out all the rules you learned in those books about how to write a #1 hit song. Mm-hmm. You know, they don't apply. The second thing you got to throw out is the mindset of scarcity, that there's not enough opportunity, unbelievable amount of opportunity. So you have to wrap your mind around that and just accept that you can be a part of it if you know how to play the game. Yep. This is the next thing, is you got to know how to play the game. It's a completely different industry, and you have to understand that the story has already been told. When your music comes into the actual when the license happens, it's all the way at the end of the post-production process. Mm-hmm. The script has been written, it's been rewritten a zillion different times, it's been pitched to production company. Those production people, they came in and they rewrote the script and made changes. Then it was finally, you know, greenlit for production. Then you know, casting agents cast the actors. You know, production crew are hired and interviewed and hired for the actual production. You know, this is like all pre-production stuff. That, you know, they're doing table reads and you know, and rehearsals and whatnot. Then they go into production. That's when, like, you know, they actually go to the locations and film and all this other stuff. There's a lot of stuff involved in that. You know, all the planning and the catering and the clothes, props,
costumes, all that stuff. Then it goes into post-production where the editors get with the director and the producer, and they sit there and they put it together. And usually by the time your music is getting to that point where your music's going to be chosen, the director and the editor and the supervisor and the producer, they've all had multiple meetings, and they already have a very clear vision of exactly what they want for that scene, right?
Yeah.
So your music then is going to be searched. They're going to look through tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of songs to find a song that's going to fit there. Oh, there's no opportunity if they're going to look through hundreds of thousands of songs. It's not the case at all. If you have your music presented correctly for them, meaning that you've got all your metadata added so that your song is easily searchable, right? You've delivered multiple mixes, stems, etc., so that your editor and so your re-recording mixer have options when it comes to editing the track, playing with it under the dialogue, and then
on their side.
On their side, crossfading into the full version once the dialogue's over, making sure that all the other sound effects fit around that music. The re-recording mixer, they work in 5.1 and 7.1 when they're mixing these shows. So, we're handing them stereo tracks, but they want to be able to throw it around that 5.1, 7.1 stereo field. Well, that's where the stems come into play, right? And again, going back to the music industry, this is a big mindset shift, because in the music industry, you finish your song, you have a stereo version, you send it out, and you hope something happens to it.
Yeah.
And for musicians who do that exact same process, and they send it out to supervisors and editors, and they go, man, no one's licensing my music. I've sent it out to all these people, and I'm not getting any calls. Well, that's the reason why. Because you've delivered music to them in a way that it's completely useless to them.
It's the
You're
wrong
still
way.
following the music industry path,
Yeah.
and you're working in a different industry. It just isn't going to work.
Well, that's
So
a
of course
brilliant
you're
thing
gonna
for
have
people to understand,
Yeah, so it comes back to like those 3 keys to success.
Yep.
The skill set we've already done,
Yep.
right? We've learned how to do that. Now we have a mindset. The mindset is making a mindset shift to realizing, okay, we're working in a different industry, lots of opportunity, but the end users absorb and utilize our music in an entirely different way than this industry over here. So therefore, we also have to shift the way we go about it, right? And then that comes back down to the actions that you take. You can either sit back and be like, oh, that's never going to work for me, and not do anything, and of course then nothing's going to happen for you. Or you can have this analysis paralysis thing where you overanalyze it and you never take any action. You're never going to be successful that way. Or you can just start taking action, do the research, find out who the people are that your music would be ideal for, and learn how to deliver music to them in a way that they can use it and use it quickly. They can audition your songs, they can search them out of hundreds of thousands of people, and then they can license them very quickly. When you know the process, it's actually the easiest thing you can do as a musician, but you're approaching it differently than what you're used to in the music industry.
That's really interesting because, as you know, I have my book about booking gigs, and developing a course about how to book gigs.
Yeah.
And really that is the same exact thing. That it comes down to the process of how you're presenting to the end user.
Yeah.
And that's extremely important because I know, speaking for myself, the beginning of my career, the first 5 years of me doing this, full time and trying to book gigs, I was doing it the complete opposite way that I should be doing it, and most people still do it that way. So once I realized that, again, it was a huge mind shift. It's interesting. I read a book and everything changed for me. It was a book by Stephen Chandler, and from that point on, I totally changed my mind about how I was going to approach booking gigs, and always thinking about the end user, your client, how they want things to be presented, and it's like a key that opens everything up and just makes everything so much easier. But for me, I was doing it completely wrong. I was doing it the way that most people do it now still. And then you just get frustrated, and you start thinking, oh well, the music industry is terrible, or the venues, the bookers, at that point it was bars. I wasn't even doing festivals yet, but you kind of start blaming it on them when really it's if you know the right approach, then you can land every time.
So here's a great example of that, just to kind of to draw an analogy, right? If you went down the street, let's say you walked down the street and you walked by a storefront and it's a new coffee shop, right? And they didn't put up any it's completely like when you walk in, or you wouldn't even have to walk in, but if you did look through the mirrors or the windows or whatever, you saw there's no drywall up on the walls. It's just the open walls with the studs, and maybe they have a little bit of the Owens insulation hammered up there, but and there's no chairs. Yep. Right, or maybe they're just all crazy chairs that like someone got at like a swap meet, where you got like these like plastic school chairs followed by like a couple old ugly stools and a bunch of really old chairs from like the 1970s for like a dining room table, right? And then you walked in. Let's say you're like, oh, this is a mess, so let me just go walk in and look at this catastrophe. And you walk in and there's a guy serving coffee with a Keurig, and he asks you which little pouch of the coffee you want so you can stick it in. And would you buy coffee from him? Or will you continue walking down to like the actual real coffee shop down the street, where they actually know how to really make coffee and you do it by hand, and it's a cool environment where you can sit down with your computer and work? Which one would you choose to go to?
The latter.
The latter, right.
Yes.
Okay, so most musicians, I've learned, and I was guilty of this in my early years, run their business like the former. They set up this little thing. They have an opportunity to go into this vacant, storefront, but they don't invest any money into, the aesthetics. They don't invest any money into putting up actual walls. They don't invest any money into getting nice tables and chairs. They don't invest money into getting a nice barista machine. I don't know what they're called, but the nice big metal thing that makes the loud noise. And they just, it's like they went to Sam's Club. They got a Keurig and the little cups,
and they set up next to Starbucks.
Yeah, and they're like, man, no one's coming into my store.
Yeah,
I mean, no one's coming into my store. Well, of course not. Of course not.
Why is everybody going into Garth Brooks' store? I don't get it. My store's right here.
Yeah, and I feel like that's what most musicians do, because they don't learn the business, right? I mean, that's
they don't learn
a great
that it's a
example.
business.
They don't learn that it's a business, but then they don't learn the business. Well, they don't understand even the basics of songwriting and publishing, right? It's kind of like, I get questions all the time just about publishing. I mean, basic stuff that you could learn in literally any music business book, but not even understanding how the ownership of their songs, the legal ownership of their songs. And I think, look, if you're a musician and you want to start a business, you should start with understanding how you own your intellectual property, right? You should understand that, because it's a business. This can be the music industry. I'm going to talk about the music industry for a second. It can be a very predatory industry. A lot of unscrupulous people will go in and take advantage of people. But it's your job as a musician not to let that happen, right? Just like it's your job as the coffee shop owner to understand how to actually make coffee. Not to stick the thing inside the Keurig and hit the button, but actually, how do you make coffee? How do you actually go and find really good beans that are going to taste good for your customers? You want to give your customers an experience so that they want to go into your coffee shop. They want to sit down with their computers. They want to use that as like their second office, because the longer they stay there, the next thing you know, they're going to come up, they're going to order another cup of coffee, and then they're going to order a croissant. And that's how you start becoming profitable. But some musicians don't want to invest in just the basics of running a business.
Totally.
That, you're never going to be successful. Because sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to jump in. I have a coming from the booking gigs and playing bigger and better shows. From my point of view, I see the same exact thing. Like your analogy is perfect. You need to build the story. You need to build a foundation. You need to make everything look good, presentable, professional. I believe a lot of people's marketing for the gigs that they're already doing are preventing them from getting better gigs. Yeah. A lot of people want to play festivals but they're stuck in the bars.
Yeah.
And it's a simple analogy. You know, those people, they don't put the time and money into getting a real website. They don't put time and money into getting, you know, hiring a graphic designer, you know, building the walls, you know, so you don't see the insulation.
Yeah.
And then they put out all of this content of, you know, and I'm not bashing bars. I would never, because that's how I started my career. Thank God for all the bars out there. But if you want to move on to the next level, if you keep perpetuating, you know, your everybody sees you playing at bars all the time. Yeah. And that's what's on your press kit. Yeah. And it looks very amateur, and you don't have professional graphics, and you don't have professional recordings, and you don't have professional video, then you're going to come across as the Keurig coffee shop next to Starbucks, and Starbucks is the band that has a professional website, has professional videos, has you know, shows themselves playing on bigger stages. So I just wanted to throw my point of view.
I'll take you one step further. I hate Starbucks. I am not a fan of it at all. There's one actually right at the bottom of my hill, and I probably walk
right there, literally.
Yeah, I walk down to it all the time. All the time. There's a really nice privately owned coffee shop about like 2 miles up the street. I'll go there, you know, throughout the week, occasionally as well. But I walk down to that Starbucks all the time because it's consistent. I don't drink coffee. I don't drink their coffee. I usually get their tea because I can't stand. I just don't like their coffee. Yeah. It's like, you know, Starbucks, right? It's always a little burnt smelling, whatever. Yeah. But the thing is that, say what you will about Starbucks, they're like that band that you can be like, man, that band sucks. But that band's playing all over the place. Yeah, because they know how to play the business. They understand the business. Starbucks understands how to create an environment for people to go to that becomes your second office. And on top of that, when I go to other cities, other states, even other countries, you know, I spend a lot of time over in China.
Yep.
Every summer with a particular artist that I tour with, and
sometimes Dean.
And sometimes Dean, yeah, absolutely.
Everybody loves Dean.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, I go to Starbucks over there because, again, there's that consistency. Now, granted, they're getting, you know, they're getting their product from China, you know, the green tea and all that stuff. It's going to be locally based out of there. It's going to have a different flavor and whatnot, and obviously there's a whole different language, and it becomes a little bit of a barrier. But I can walk into that Starbucks no matter where I'm at. Germany, China, you know, Seattle, Tennessee, wherever, and I know that there's going to be consistency there. And that's the thing. Even though I don't like it, even though I'm not a fan of what of their particular drinks. Yeah. That's the reason why that company is successful. That's the reason why that band that might not have as good of the songs as someone else does who's bitching about it, the reality is that they have all the other stuff in place. They know the business, right? And just put yourself in that position of being the customer. Do you want to go to the guy who has the Keurig store with no drywall and no place for you to sit and no vibe? Or would you, and it might even be better coffee, who knows? Or do you want to go to Starbucks where you're going to get the consistency of a place where you know that you can go in there, it's going to be relaxing, you can find a table, you can usually associate with, talk to some, you know, random people and have a good time, or you can sit out on the patio. You're going to go there. Most people will. And that's the same thing with running a music business. And it's the same thing when it comes into the sync world. When you look at your end users in the sync world who are working on TV shows and films, their deadlines are very real. You know, they have to have their music when they need it. And they're not in the business of teaching you how to work in the licensing world. If they have to teach you how to work in the licensing world, they're not going to work with you. They're going to work with the next person who's already done the research and knows how to play the game.
Absolutely.
So having success in licensing is not hard. It requires a mindset shift. You have to approach things slightly different, and you have to learn a process that benefits and is very value oriented to your end users. In the music industry, you're always promoting yourself, right? And that's what we do as artists, right? In the music industry, that's what we're used to. But in the licensing world, in the sync licensing world, everything we do is a service to our end users. We're servicing our end users with quality songs that they can search, audition, and license very quickly and very easily. And that's it. It's very simple.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. It's really great to have someone who's so successful come on and share, your real life stories and your knowledge about this kind of stuff, because I always say I wish I had this kind of stuff 10 years ago when I was just a tadpole trying to figure things out. It's invaluable for people, and that's what I love about podcasts and stuff. And I'm a podcast freak. I listen to them all the time. And it's just really, really great. I think that everything that you do is, I know it's already helping a lot of people, and thank you for helping some of the people that are going to be listening and watching this podcast. I really appreciate it. And you have a course with all this stuff too, and I'll put a link in it in
I have
the description.
A course. The course is only open a couple times a year because it's one of those things where I'm very involved with the people who go through it.
Yep.
So it's not it's pretty limited. However, depending on when this is going to be out, I'm going to be making it available one more time before the end of the year. However, I also have a book that people can go and they can download for free, and that covers the process that I've used. Mm-hmm. And then of course the course is like literally the deep dive into every little aspect. It's of this is how you do this, this is how you do this, and I'm very much oriented it. The way that I structure just my whole life is very much step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. I figure out little strategies on how to accomplish things, and that allows me to get them done rather quickly. That's how I've run my whole business, and that's how I run my songs. So my whole process is based around a 4-step process that will speed up the process of getting your music out there, and it also will teach you how to actually deliver it with all the right metadata, all the different versions, exactly as your end users, and I use end users as the general term, but when I say end users, I'm talking your music supervisors and your music editors, your re-recording mixers, all the people that are further along the chain in the licensing world than you are, right? You're here, and they're all a couple steps further than you. So they're going to be the people who would be taking your music and then applying it to the scene and whatnot, how to deliver your music to them in a way that they can easily search it, they can easily audition it, spot check it, and then how they can ultimately license it very quickly from you. And you can ultimately, generate a great income doing it on a consistent basis, and that's the whole goal with licensing. And let me just say this to those listening, because I know a lot of us are all coming from the music industry. Over the next couple days, this is my assignment for you. Whether you ever check out anything I have to share or not, that's okay. This is my assignment. Wherever you're at, just open your ears for the next couple days and listen. If you're at a coffee shop like Starbucks, open your ears and listen. If you're at a train station or an airport, open your ears and listen. When you're watching TV in the evening or the afternoon or at 3 o'clock in the morning, just open your ears and listen.
The supermarket too.
The supermarket, exactly. You'll find that there's music all around us, 24/7, and a lot of it is not the stuff that you hear on Top 40 radio, right? And there are people who are creating that music consistently every day who are making a great living at it, because there's an abundance of opportunity to start shifting your mind away from that traditional music industry route that we're so used to and look at all of the other outlets that music is necessary. As humans, we need good music in our lives. It's like a requirement, it's like a human need.
Amen.
So whether you're watching a TV show or as Tim said, walking through the mall or the grocery store, you're going to hear music.
Yep.
And there's no reason why you can't be one of the people who is contributing your music to the greater good of the world and getting your music heard by millions of people in those various other outlets.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you again so much, Mr. Elsner, for being on.
All right, Timmy.
We always appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, man.
All right.